Daniel, I'm going to turn it over to you. Will you share some pitfalls that podcasters make?
I think it comes down to this one thing that, just to be blunt, it's selfishness. Starting a podcast and expecting only things for you, expecting value only for you, wanting everything to be about you and only what you want to get from your podcast. I teach a principle that I call the podcast profit paradigm, PROFIT. That stands for popularity, relationships, opportunities, fun, income, and tangibles. These are one or multiple things that you might get from your podcast and why you might be running your podcast. Maybe you want to make money. That's the income. Maybe you just want to have fun. Well, that's part of profiting from your podcast too. But what you need to focus on is, what does your listener get from your podcast? How do they profit from your podcast? How are you helping them with their popularity, relationships, opportunities, fun, income, and tangibles in their own lives, professional or personal lives? So when we're starting out, we can often think too much about ourselves, thinking, hey, leave a rating and review, subscribe to the podcast, support me on Patreon, buy my products, do all of this stuff. And we often make the mistake of asking for all of this stuff for ourselves up front and first. And that's a big no-no. Do not ask for things for yourself first. Give first. Give through the value of your podcast, through whatever that profit is that your audience should be getting from your podcast. Give that first, or at least give some of it first before you ask for anything in return. Apply that both on the micro level of your individual episodes and the macro level of your whole podcast. Like, if you want to have supporters through ongoing subscriptions or value for value payments or anything like that, it's okay to ask in your first episode, but you could also think about, maybe you wait a few episodes before you ask. Or the same thing like with an email newsletter. Or I like the way that Gary Vaynerchuk puts this, it's jab, jab, right hook, where you're doing these other things first before you come in with the value you're asking back from your audience. So deliver that value first in your episode. Make the first minute of your episode, the first seconds, if possible, jump quickly into that value you want to deliver. Don't ask for subscriptions or ratings or reviews or donations or anything like that up front. Ask for that later. Or maybe you could put that in the middle of your episode or intersperse some of those calls to action throughout your episode. That's more impactful as well. I think about this often. You see this so much at conferences, and I get a little bit annoyed almost every time I see it, is a conference speaker will start off with, let me tell you a little bit about myself. No, to be honest, I don't care yet. And that's the key, is I don't quite care yet about your background and history or anything like that, unless that background is part of your content. Like, you're telling the story of how you survived some miraculous thing and then some lessons that you learned from that. Then yes, you tell that story first, because that is the content that people are coming for. But if it's all of this, I grew up in such and such place and I have this background and I run these companies and such. Okay, now let's get into the content. That whole kind of thing, that can be cut out at the beginning. Same thing in your podcast. You don't have to tell all about yourself up front. You don't have to give all your calls to action up front. Give the value first. And always focus on that value that you give so that it becomes a sense of growing, a sense of reciprocity in your audience, where they feel like, she has given me so much value through her podcast. Yes, I absolutely want to give a 5-star review. Or yes, I absolutely want to give some money back or buy this product or visit her sponsor or anything like that, because I am so grateful for the value that she's given me. I want to give a little bit of value back to her. That's this concept that we have in podcasting called value for value, where you should be giving value in your podcast and your audience can figure out what that is worth to them and then consider giving some value back in the form of many different things like time, talent, or treasure, like money. That's building that sense of reciprocity among your audience to give back to you. And yes, it's okay if you are podcasting for profit in some way, and profit, not just money. It's okay if you're doing that. Don't forget your audience. Make sure they are profiting too.